another special edition of the Simracing Perspectives podcast. I'm here today with Robert Wiesenmüller from RaceRoom. Hello, Robert.
Hello.
And Robert is going to explain to us and tell us more about RaceRoom and RaceRoom Esports. So, Robert, to begin, can you explain what exactly RaceRoom is?
Yeah, so RaceRoom actually is a lot of things, and I think most of you probably know the game RaceRoom Racing Experience.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the main things that we do. We have the game, of course, but especially in Germany, RaceRoom is also a lot more because we do a lot of customer events. So if you want to book some racing simulators for your for your showroom, for your garage, or also for your event when you want to do something with your colleagues also. You can do that. We've got some permanent locations. It's kind of like you can imagine like a bowling center, but you go sim racing.
Okay. Really?
And we have that. We have it at the Nürburgring, for example, and also a couple ones now in Benelux, and I think in Sweden as well. And recently in Malaysia too. So we went to Asia and expanded there a little bit. So we do that. Then we produce the hardware, the game seats, and we do also now esports events. And that's kind of my topic.
I saw a video recently, and the video featured, if I remember correctly, a Malaysian lady who was a racing driver on the official RaceRoom channel. Was it so?
Yeah, in Malaysia, we opened a new office in last year. And, on the one hand, they are producing some of the content for our games. So they're making like 3D models for the cars and so on. And on the other hand, they are also trying to push the topic sim racing in Asia, because in Asia, sim racing or motorsports in general isn't quite on the same, on the same level of popularity as it is here in Europe.
Yes.
And we are one of the first to really go there and trying to get some things going.
Okay.
We had some nice events in Kuala Lumpur at the Formula One race. With the Valtteri Bottas, for example, participating in one of our competitions. And it's an interesting project, but it's all kind of still at the beginning, I would say.
Okay. And in terms of the equipment you provide, is it like a bespoke service? So you could arrive and install sim hardware for a weekend. Can people also buy a solution and have it permanently in place, or can you also rent? Is it basically so that kind of anything's possible depending on what the customer wants?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, anything is possible. Well, most of our customers, they just buy a game seat, right? They have their own PC, they have their own wheel, and they just buy a seat.
Okay.
And I would say that's the majority. And another big part is that there's an event, like a summer festival or so from a company or at the car dealership.
Yeah.
And they call us and they say, okay, we want to do an event. So stuff like this happens a lot of the time. And then they just rent the simulators for like 2 days, and we come there, we build them, we come with staff, and we just provide the service.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the most common way. And of course, if you're interested in doing that, you can always book us, because it's quite nice, because we can do some extra things like put your livery in the game and so on.
Okay.
And so this is a normal case. But then, of course, we have these big esports events, and that's kind of the special case.
Yes. With the Road to Green Hell event I covered earlier with Peter from Denmark, from the branding point of view, there's the KW logo, there's the RaceRoom logo, and then the Sector 3. So I'm familiar with it to a degree, but can you explain the relationship between KW? It's KW, is it so that they manufacture suspension parts, or is it auto parts? What is it exactly KW make?
Yeah, well, KW is, you're right, they're doing suspension parts.
Yeah.
They're aftermarket sales, so it's not the ones that you get when you buy your car in the car dealership, but it's the ones that you get if you want to, have a nice suspension.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the guy who founded KW, Klaus Wohlfahrt, he is also the guy behind all RaceRoom operations.
Yes.
So he's the guy who he was a racing driver before he started KW.
Oh, really?
And but more on a club level, I would say. But here in the German local racing scene, he was driving. And the whole idea of KW came from motorsports. And we do a lot in KW. There's a lot of connections with Real Motorsports. A lot of teams come there and tune their cars at the KW factory, and lots of the teams are using KW in their when they race. And so his vision was to make the emotions of motorsports accessible for anyone.
Yes.
And that's why he went into sim racing, because sim racing really is it's the whole world where you can get very close to motorsports at a kind of low cost.
Yes.
And to explain the relation between KW and RaceRoom in Sector 3, basically KW is behind everything. And, he's the boss of RaceRoom, and he's also overseeing the operations at Sector 3 studios. And RaceRoom itself, the part of RaceRoom that does the events and competitions and also the seats and so on, they are located in the same building as the KW suspensions. So it's very closely together. And then we have Sector 3 Studios, which is, of course, a Swedish development studio.
Yeah.
And they also belong to the operation, but they are, they're in a different country. They're, kind of operating separately. But I would say it's all relatively close. And it's an interesting constellation, because usually in gaming, you have more that they are the big gaming publishers, and they have a lot of titles like ego shooters, MOBAs, whatever.
Yes.
And then they also have a racing game. And here it's a bit different, because we are kind of like from the world of motorsports, and then we also have a racing game.
And in terms of back to the original point, if you have your simulation setups in Malaysia and different cases, is it always the RaceRoom software that you're running on these systems?
Yeah. If there's a customer from motorsports that wants to have a simulator from us, and they, that this track or car isn't available, then of course we can make an exception. But in general, of course, we also want to push our own software when we do the events and
yes.
vice versa.
Yes.
So we use a separate event software, which has a few extra features. For example, you do not need Steam, you do not need internet to run it, which is quite nice, because these things, when you have random people driving, they might not have a Steam account.
Yes.
And they might also not have enough time to enter all this information, and maybe there's no internet. So at the events, we're using a different version of RaceRoom called the Evo software. But in general, like in terms of the content, in terms of the driving, it's pretty much the same.
So I guess you could say it's like as they say in the business, it's like a B2B and B2C model. Is that a fair?
Yeah, in a way. We also have some extra features, of course, especially tailored for events.
Yes.
For example, in the leader, we use a lot of the leaderboard in the events too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a way you can log in with the touchscreen, for example. And then you just type in your name and you're in, right? It automatically assigns a simulator for you, and all this stuff is done. That doesn't have to be a person who stands there all the time who tells you, okay, you have to do this and you have to do that, but it's kind of self-explanatory.
Yes. To make it as automated as possible. And if I might ask, are there elements in the game that we play, are there any features in our content in the consumer version of RaceRoom that have come from the version that you guys use in your simulators that you're renting and so on?
Well, I think the whole idea of the leaderboard and the way it works now kind of came from the event version and the way leaderboards work there. Yeah. So this is a while ago. This is before I started working at RaceRoom. But this idea of making these leaderboards, it was mainly an idea for events. Mm-hmm. And then we just expanded it and we created the system online. So there's always, you always get some good ideas at the events, but it's also a different group of players. For example, RaceRoom has a different difficulty levels as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when you play online, almost everyone plays on Get Real.
Yes, they do.
So you might wonder what's the point? But if you go to an event, especially a customer event, that's not the case. Most of the people do not use Get Real because they just have like 5 minutes where they can drive, and then they prefer the easy mode, or when you have kids driving, for example.
Okay, yeah.
And that kind of explains, some of the features.
So Robert, an additional question before we continue: when did Klaus actually set up RaceRoom?
I'm actually not sure. I think it must have been like 2010. Because it was back in the day before RaceRoom Racing Experience was a thing. And back then, they were using a variation of GTI Evolution.
Yes.
And that was when RaceRoom was originated. And that was when the first locations opened. So way before we had the current RaceRoom software.
Okay, so nearly 10 years ago already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to a topic from earlier. Why is RaceRoom at the Nürburgring? What exactly do you have there? And now I know you've mentioned this earlier, but are there any other similar locations, and where are they exactly?
Yeah, so the connection between RaceRoom and the Nürburgring is quite an interesting one, because we have a permanent racing center, or race room. That's kind of where the name comes from as well.
Yeah.
At the Nürburgring, and that's our flagship race room.
Yes.
And it's located at the Ring Boulevard, so that's this big area when you're behind the start finish straight, and where the Ring Arena is, the Ring Boulevard with the big screen, and it's like a permanent store which is in there. And we have this for quite a while. And there's a good connection between the Nürburgring and the race room. And so we've kind of thought, okay, maybe we can build on this, and maybe we can set up something special as well, because the store is always open and people play there. It's nice, but we kind of wanted to push it a little bit and do a bigger event at the Nürburgring.
Okay.
And it's something that KW and the Nürburgring have been planning for a long time, but it never really materialized, because if you want to do such an event, there have to be a lot of factors that come together.
Yes.
The cost is one of the big factors, of course, but also, getting green light from all the parties that are involved to actually run an event, getting everything organized in time, having the correct team to run such an event. And for a while, that wasn't really the case. And finally, in this year, we did the event.
And the event from the weekend of May the 11th, was that one of the first major events you've had?
Yeah, so we also run a different championship with Mercedes. It's called the Mercedes AMG eRacing competition.
Yes.
And that is also a championship where people drive online, first on the leaderboard, then in live streamed multiplayer races.
Yes.
And then we had the final event. And we already had this for 2 years.
Was this at the... Is that this at the Hockenheim Ring?
Yes, exactly.
Ah, okay. Yes.
So we have a bit of experience with this. And we also ran smaller events. Like there was something with the GT Masters a while ago. We had a cup at the Simracing Expo, for example, last year. We also were at the Simracing Expo when the Simracing Expo started off.
Yes.
And so we have a bit of history when it comes to these events. But the difference here was really that this event was the first time that we organized it from start to finish.
Yes.
So a lot of the times you are booked as a part of an event.
Okay.
And then you go to the DTM, and it's kind of the event of Mercedes, because we go into their hospitality, we go into their...
It's Mercedes branded, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah, it's Mercedes branded, but they also provide quite a few features for the event. They provide a camera team, for example, and they provide the kind of a script for the evening and so on. And it's a bit different. And also it's much less simulators than we had at the Nürburgring. So yeah, we did events before, but we never did something on this scale.
So the event at the Hockenheim Ring, if you were doing that on behalf of Mercedes, is that so that you go to their hospitality suite and you set up the simulators and then you take them away? So there's nothing permanent there. Is that so?
Yes. So at the DTM, we're not really working with the DTM anymore. We're working with Mercedes.
Oh yes, that's of course, that I remember. Yes, that's true.
And they have simulators from us that they bring to every race in the paddock, or at least to the German races. But that's kind of something different, They just bring them there, they put them up for the fans that have paddock passes. And then when it comes to the final event, it's something where we put all of our simulators and all of our other equipment in the in the truck. We drive there, we build it up, and then we run the event. Of course, we are not only putting the simulators up. I'm also commentating at the Mercedes events, for example.
Okay.
And we do have the sporting organization of the event that also falls into our hands. And with the streams as well, like when we stream for these races online, that's also something that we completely produce on our own, without Mercedes or without external production companies or so. But for these events, we're always collaborating with the production company. So, and it's not only just putting the simulators there and then everything works. That would be nice, but
Yeah.
it's a bit more effort than that. But yeah, in general, it's a Mercedes event.
But my question was basically it's set up bespoke for the event, and then you take simulators away and then reinstall them. And isn't it so that the DTM Championship isn't it so that it starts and ends at the Hockenheimring? Isn't it so?
Yeah, it does.
If the DTM Championship organization they have their own gear, are they running your software? I suppose they are.
So the way it is right now is that the DTM itself, so the league, the championship, we do not have the current DTM license anymore, and they currently do not collaborate with any game actually. So there just is no DTM game. But in the paddock, there's a lot of places that use simulators. For example, at Hankook, the guys who produce the tires, at Big Bear, of course at Mercedes too, and most of them use these three. They use the RaceRoom software. So we are still very tied to, sponsors and partners of the DTM, or teams that are entered in the DTM. For example, we do some stuff with Marco Wittmann as well, who drives for BMW. So we're still closely tied with, some actors that are involved in the DTM, but we're not doing something with DTM directly. So we used to have a DTM virtual championship, which was just online championship. There was no events, and that was not running anymore. So that one got replaced by the Mercedes AMG eRacing competition. And we use DTM cars, but it's not really DTM.
Yes, okay, I understand. And I actually own the DTM 15, 16, and 17 content, and I'm aware from Georg that the relationship had ended. That's clear. Okay, that's interesting. We've touched on this already, but 2 questions at the same time. Is it so that I've heard references to the RaceRoom cafe at the Nürburgring? Is it you can just walk in, get a coffee, and sit down and have a go in the simulator? Is that the concept, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the permanent location that I talked about. That is the RaceRoom cafe, and you can drink a coffee. It's kind of split. So like when you go in, on the left side you have the counter, and you can get a donut or a coffee, and then you can see already on the right side there's simulators, and I think in total we have 28 simulators now in the location. So we've got 20 regular ones, then 6 with the triple screen, and 2 motion simulators.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And you can just go in, and there are also places like regular tables and so on. So you can just go in there and sit and drink a coffee, even if you're not interested in sim racing. But especially when there's a real race on the Nürburgring, most of the people go in and they want to play multiplayer. They want to race against their friends, and we can just set it up.
Okay, on like a LAN level kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then what exactly is it's branded the Ring Arena at the Nürburgring. And I know we've touched on this already, but what was the story behind the creation? Now, I know that it's Fanatec hardware in the Ring Arena, isn't it so?
Well, the Ring Arena itself, it's like a ice hockey arena, It's just a big arena, and they just have it at the Nürburgring. To be honest, I don't know why. Sometimes they do like a boxing event, and sometimes they do ice hockey or a concert or so. And this is something that the Nürburgring just have. And basically, we do not have anything to do with it. So it's just permanent
really?
arena.
Okay, that clarifies it. So the footage from, for example, there was the weekend of May the 11th. Jimmy was there, and Jimmy had video of the arena, and there was all this. So is that gear? Is that set up like for an event on a temporary basis and then taken away?
Yes, you have to imagine that this arena was completely empty. Right?
Okay.
There was nothing. There was no stage. There was no lights. There was no simulators. Nothing. And a few days before of course we planned this. Yeah. But a week before the event, we put all of our stuff, basically everything that we have. We brought it there, and of course we coordinated before that. We can get a stage, we can get the lights, and so on. We can get the big canvas and the beamer, and it was a lot of coordination. And then we went there, and we built up all the stuff from scratch. And so everything that you see on the pictures, and with the race car and the red lights and the stage, all of this stuff is temporary.
Oh wow, and that's a lot of work.
Yes, and 24 hours afterwards, 24 hours after the checkered flag, everything was gone.
Okay, yeah.
So now there's nothing really that it's just an event.
It's just an event. So, and which as you said, you have kind of only really started to do on yourselves this year, where you haven't been like, let's say, in cooperation with Mercedes or Mercedes AMG or Hankook. Now this is you've now started to do your own dedicated events, for example, at the Ring Arena at the Nürburgring.
Yeah, so this was the first. I mean, of course, we had a lot of help from the Nürburgring when it came to the coordination, and also a bit from the WTCR.
Yes.
Because we had them involved in the event as well. But this was the first time that we kind of. It's also something that I guess we kind of wanted to prove, that we can just go there. We're a small company, but we can go there. We can make a really nice event. That was also the aim, and of course also to just establish it,
yes.
as a regular thing maybe for the future.
So you have the cafe at the Nürburgring, which you said a total of 28 setups, including standard, triple screen and motion, and then I guess you have a location in Kuala Lumpur. Is it so?
Yeah. In Kuala Lumpur it's a bit different because we have 2 locations in Malaysia, and they are it's like a franchise model.
Yes.
So we're not operating them themselves. At the Nürburgring, it's our location, but basically, if anyone can open a race room if they want to, if they they need to bring a little bit of money, of course, and have a proper location to do that. But that's a concept that can be exported anywhere.
Okay, so it's like a franchise model. Okay, that's interesting. Can you explain the RaceRoom events calendar at the Nürburgring? And for example, now I know it's still relatively early days in terms of setting up your own events, but the calendar for, let's say, for example, 2018, 2019, and then who are the events designed for? When you're conceptualizing these events, where's your starting point?
So, but for the future, I can say nothing, right? We will see. I hope we will do another event at the Nürburgring next year, but it's too early to say. And when it comes to these events, who are we targeting for? That's an interesting question. Because in a way, like when you have conventional esports, it kind of works in a way that you try to get the best players that you have on your game.
Yes.
And then you try to make a really big show out of it, and you kind of show it like you show the football on the television. And so you kind of the gameplay itself, that's only for a very limited amount of players, and they try to reach more people over the streams. And our Mercedes events are set up like this. So, okay, everyone can drive on the leaderboard, of course, and we always have some nice free content there on the leaderboard. But this event is just for the best players. And here at the Nürburgring, we try to do something a little bit more different, a little bit more broad. So the team event, the 4-hour race, it was with an online qualifier for the best teams. So in total, there was a possibility for 72 drivers to participate at the event. But with the WTCR, it was different, so that anyone could just come to the event and just drive and try to qualify there. Okay. So any random spectator at the Nürburgring could come and could try to get into the races. And of course, if you drove online, you might have won some free tickets, so you would not have to pay for your session when you try to qualify. But we also hosted the races in different divisions. So it was not like a shootout format, but you were kind of always driving against people of a similar skill level. So also for someone who's inexperienced, who qualifies maybe for Division 4 race or so, it's still fun because you still race against other people in Division 4 and you do not get... Of course, you fight for less money in the Division 4 than in Division 1, but you still kind of have your own field. You have the competition against anyone on the leaderboard, and then you're kind of in your group. Yeah. And that's how you drive the whole event. So it's really, I mean, I guess it's targeted for people who already play racing simulators. Because if you've never played this, then it doesn't really make sense. But it's both aimed for the people who are super competitive, but it's also aimed for the people who are maybe not the most super competitive drivers, but they just want to have something special. You know, when you drive a race online, it's nice, and I do it a lot, but it's something different compared to when you're at an event. And when you're sitting on a big stage and everything looks nice and you're sitting right next to the driver that you're battling with, and you have commentators and you have cameras and you have all this surrounding, and you have a real racetrack a few meters away. And that's really something special. That's something you cannot get when you drive online. And so this kind of experience is something that we also provide for the people who come to the event. And it's also really cheap. I mean, if you're going to the Nürburgring anyway, you just need to buy one session and maybe it's already enough for you to qualify. Yeah. So it's really for the competitive drivers, it's a platform to, for their competition, but it's also for other people, it's just an experience.
So you can't really say what the calendar is going forward, but I'm assuming that, for example, you have the GP circuit at the Nürburgring, you will have the Nordschleife, so you will have once a year you will have the 24-hour race, and then you will have different events. You have the VLN event, and then you have the different events using the GP circuit, and for example, one of them being the DTM Championship. So are you trying to make it so that you will set up simulators in the ring arena at the Nürburgring to coincide with actual races happening at the same time, so there are people around? Is that the general idea?
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, we are planning to make this an annual event, right? Okay. So it's not going to happen that we have an event in the ring arena at the Nürburgring every month. Because I think at the moment, there's not enough sim racers really to make this work that are also going to travel to the Nürburgring to participate in these events. And also we already have the cafe in which you can really run nice, smaller events. So this should be, for us, we plan this to make an annual highlight, and then we just see, which other series might be interested in joining in as well. So this year we did it with the WTCR.
Yes.
And with the Nürburgring itself, but not with the 24-hour race. So maybe in the future, there's some new opportunities. And of course, we are talking with a lot of, series and manufacturers and so on, who are interested in this sort of concept. And the Mercedes competition, this year we ran 2 live events, for example. We run the one at Hockenheim, and we run an additional one in the museum from Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart. So we're kind of making this transition from, it's just an event that we do to, okay, this is interesting content for our show, Yes. So Mercedes, they just book us and we are part of the show. And so at the moment, I cannot tell how many events will be happening, but it's something that I'm really interested in expanding. So there should be a few more events, hopefully, in the future.
And I guess it's still early in terms of esports, and especially for sim racing. I mean, there is an active scene there, but I guess you could say it's still relatively in the early stages, isn't it so?
Yeah, so at the moment, there's a lot of movement, I think. Lots of new teams forming in collaboration with professional gaming organizations, or especially racing teams.
Yes.
And there's F1 Esports, which you can say, okay, is this really sim racing? I don't know. I don't want to comment on this, but
yeah.
What they do is, at least, they really push the competitive scene as well.
Yes.
And this competitive scene, it was kind of always there in sim racing for a long time. I mean, you had leagues like FSR that have been running for years. You had leagues on the race department, for example. I drove in race department 10 years ago. Or 9 years ago in the championship. And so this competitive form, it's kind of in the DNA of racing anyway, right?
Yes,
I mean,
true.
Racing is a lot, it's about positions in a way.
Yes, true.
And for a lot of sim racers, I think it's always kind of interesting, because for a lot of sim racers, that doesn't really seem to be the main motivation, in my experience. So there's a very large group in sim racing who's more about the simulation aspect of the cars and the tracks, and that everything feels exactly like, like the real car is supposed to feel.
That's how it would be for somebody like me. Yeah.
Yeah. But personally, I come from a slightly different group, I would say. So of course, it's also nice if the car feels as closely as possible to the real car. And I think we, especially since we work with KW and closely with the manufacturers, we're on a good way there to bring it closer and closer.
Yeah.
But for me, the main driving force when I drive a race is that I want to win the race.
Yes.
And that is this competitive aspect. And a lot of people have that, but it's not, it hasn't been as prominent in sim racing for a long time.
No.
And I think this is something that is really changing. And there's this whole scene, it's still in the development, but you can already see that there's also quite a bit of interest in these types of events that just put the focus on something different.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say from the esports side of motorsports, and you mentioned F1, I suppose it's fair to say that official titles like F1 from Codemasters and WRC from Milestone or Kyloton or Dirt 4, like Dirt 4 had this World Championship recently, actually won by a Finn. I guess those titles are kind of console first, is that fair to say? As is GT Sport, and maybe as an example at the Dirt 4 event recently, they had people who were playing on PC and playing on console, but I guess you guys are coming from a different aspect because your title is you're only on PC, you're running an a la carte model, and I think there is a large community there and esports is growing, but I think it's split between the people who run RaceRoom and R Factor and iRacing, and then you have the other side of it which is kind of console based, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, but what I saw so far is that even on these games that are split between console and PC, usually most of the competitive drivers are on PC.
Really?
And this is something that's like this in esports in general, though, that it's generally more successful with PC games. And a lot of our competitors are trying to make it work for everyone. And for us, in a way, it's easier because we don't have to do that because our game just simply doesn't exist for console.
Yeah, that's
true.
That's an interesting aspect, actually. Yeah.
It's still quite. It's always a challenge because you have, of course, split between so many different games, and every game has their own racing series. Codemasters have the Formula One. And Kyloton have the World Rally Championship, and we have the WTCR, and I guess the Nürburgring. And then there's iRacing, which has a lot of the competitive racers on their platform.
Again, and highly competitive, of course.
Yeah. So for me, it was interesting to see that at our event, we had a lot of teams that came over from other platforms, or that are active on multiple platforms. For example, you mentioned the Finn who won the event.
Yeah, Joona Hakkonen,
I know that there was an event in the Project Cars, for example, which was also with Rallycross. Somehow everyone does Rallycross. It was won by Joni Tomala.
Cars too, yeah.
Yeah. There was won by another Finn, Joni Tomala. And he actually also drove in our event. So you sometimes have these people, okay, they're in for the competition, and then it's not about only the game, it's about racing in general. And it's something nice as well, I guess, that you can really play different games and drive different types of racing when in real life it would not be possible. Would be
that is true. And each game has its own strengths and weaknesses, and not every game has every track, not every game has every car or every era of racing car. So, and I'm the same. I'm no different. I have a mix of everything, and somebody will say, even somebody says to me, well, I want to play this track in this era, and I can say from the top of my head, okay, well, I recommend this game. Actually, I mentioned in the previous podcast, somebody pinged me last week on the channel, and he asked about RaceRoom, and I advised. I said these are the steps, and he went and he brought the Pro Pack. Actually, he was a VR user looking for to start. So I was happy I was able to help him. And back to the Mercedes-Benz Museum at Stuttgart. If I went to if I was visiting the museum and I had to go on a simulator there, would I be playing a version of RaceRoom?
Yes, of course. You would be playing the event version, and if you go to the museum today, for example, you could actually qualify for the live event, because there it works like this, that for this museum event, the qualifiers in the museum, so it's for every guest of the museum. And for us, it's also nice because a lot of people who are interested in cars, of course, they get a try.
Yeah. And are they running the DTM cars now under the AMG brand, or how does it go? What exactly is there?
We're running a special campaign this year with Mercedes in general, which is the history of DTM, because Mercedes has the 30 years anniversary.
Yes.
So we go through the years, and on the online competition, we run the 1992, the 190E, Evo 2. Then we run the 1995 C-Class. That one is currently on the online competition. And I mean, if you just go on RaceRoom, you can actually play it for free. You don't have to buy any content. So you can just try it out.
Yeah.
Then we have the 2003 CLK, the 2005 C-Class, and then we run the 2015 car as well in the campaign when Pascal Wehrlein won the championship. And in the museum, we had to decide on one car, and we picked the 92 car.
Okay.
So for this event, we're running the 92 car.
Okay. And I noticed there was a story on Race Department yesterday about some new Mercedes content, DTM content, and that's for a 30th anniversary, was it so?
Yeah, exactly. This is for the competition, and this competition this year is in the running with the theme of the 30-year anniversary.
So it all kind of ties in together, your relationship with Mercedes at the museum at Stuttgart, and then you have your own events, and of course your B2B, shall we say, your actually customer content that's available. So it all kind of ties in together, so to speak.
Yeah, our Mercedes event and the Nürburgring event, they're not really connected.
No.
Except for the fact that they're both RaceRoom esports events.
Yes.
So, it's different championships, and if you do well in one championship, it doesn't mean anything for the other. But I guess the aspect that combines it in the end is that it's the same team that is organizing it.
Yes.
And of course, we can use the experience from Mercedes events for the Nürburgring and vice versa.
Yeah, they're connected in terms of the hardware and the software they run, but of course they may be running completely different. They may be running a representation of a completely different racing series, so to speak. Yeah. So can we discuss the Nürburgring on the weekend of May 11th to coincide with the actual 24 hours of the Nürburgring? Now, this was one of your first major events, and this was held at the Ring Arena at the Nürburgring. Now, the Esports WTCR Oscaro Launch event. Now, I didn't know what Oscaro was, and it was from watching this Dirt 4 championship that I realized Oscaro is a racing team. Is it so? A simulation racing team?
Well, Oscaro itself is the car parts dealer. They're selling car parts, and they're based in France, and they're selling in a lot of countries. They're not selling in Germany, so I wasn't so familiar with them before, but they've been sponsoring real motorsports for a while, including a driver in WTCR called John Philippi.
Okay.
And they also, they kind of sponsor a racing team that's called SDL. Okay. And they are running now under their flag, and they are the series sponsor of WTCR. So as the series sponsor of WTCR, they also kind of sponsored our event.
We touched on this already, but the Oscaro event, who was the event intended for? Was it for teams and also for people who happened to be at the Nürburgring at that particular weekend?
So it worked like this. Last year, we already did a championship at WTCC online.
Yes.
And we wanted to run this event last year, but then it didn't really work out with the times and dates. And then, of course, the real WTCC disappeared and got replaced. And so we moved this all into this year.
I see. And, yes, of course, yeah.
So some of the players that drove online, they had already won free tickets for the leaderboard. But that didn't mean like a free entry for the race. It just means, okay, if you want to drive in the qualifier for a certain amount of time, it's free.
Okay.
And so the best drivers online also, they get like VIP tickets from the WTCR and so on. So it's quite nice for them. Okay. But so we have a couple of drivers who participated online, and they kind of get the incentive to come to the event. And then also, then we switched, of course, to the TCR cars. We switched to the Audi TCR that we have. And so we ran a different online competition this year, but it was only meant for the drivers to prepare for the event.
Okay.
So you can drive online, you can test it out, but it was not really a competition.
Not a qualifier.
It was more like a test session.
Okay.
And the actual qualifier for the event just happened in the Ring Arena on the first 2 event days. So anyone could come.
Okay.
I mean, if you never played RaceRoom before, you can still drive. It's no problem. You can come, you get your ticket.
And it's free?
Well, it's only free if you have a free ticket, right? Otherwise, it's not free.
Is it so that I buy a ticket to attend the 24 hours of the Nürburgring and it's included with that?
No, it's like this, that you can enter the arena for free if you're a spectator, and you can watch everything for free. You do not need a ticket for the 24-hour race.
Okay.
Because it's in the boulevard, and there it's not restricted.
Yeah.
But if you want to participate in the competition, and if you want to qualify for one of the races, you need to buy a ticket for the qualifier. And that ticket allows you to drive on a leaderboard for a certain amount of time. But it was not really expensive. You can get a ticket for €10. Well, unless they won a free ticket in an online competition last year.
So it's 10 euro basically to enter. And the Audi version, the Audi you used, this is an official WTCR event. Is that Audi then? Will that appear in RaceRoom for consumers at some point? It's not in. Yeah, okay. So it's not in the game yet.
No, it's technically already in the game, but it's not being sold yet.
Yeah.
Because we want to make a nice pack.
Yes.
With the WTCR, and I cannot tell any concrete dates, but we're working on it, and I've seen some nice other TCR cars in the testing version. So
okay, and I guess that's a front wheel drive series, is it so?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the other front wheel drive series you have, for example, like the Volvo that's in there. So you have different series represented in the game. And then the Road to Green Hell 4-hour endurance event, I guess that's clear to many, but who was that event intended for?
Yeah, that one had an online qualifier, and that one was also completely free, by the way. So you just had to drive in you had to own the content, I guess. You had to own the Nordschleife and one of the GT3 cars in RaceRoom to drive in the qualifier. But you drove online in the qualifier. You found a team, and we kind of helped a little bit if you were from a country far away, and we could connect you with some drivers that also showed some interest. But a lot of the teams, they already exist before, of course. Then you could enter a team. It always has to be 3 drivers per team. You can pick your car, and then you drive on the leaderboard, and we combine the times, and the best 24 teams get invited.
And if I travel down there, there's a camping space provided and parking and so on.
Yeah, exactly. If you qualify for this team event, you get a free camping ticket and you get a free parking. And we also had a bus shuttle for the players who flew from somewhere else in Europe. And then because at the Nürburgring, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of hard to get there. And it's very hard to get the hotel because we announced very late. And so we tried to do everything that, for the players, that they have a nice experience and they have a troll-free experience and that they can actually access our event, not that they get stuck somewhere. So that we did that, and that actually worked really well. I was surprised myself how there was no problems at all.
So my assumption was that the WTCR Oscaro event, that came first, if you will, and then you added the Road to Green Hell event just because the weekend was occurring and you wanted to use the setup while you had the equipment installed for the weekend. So
and it's not only the setup, in the arena, of course. It's also for us, it's added exposure because we do a show. When you do a leaderboard, no one watches that because it's not interesting. But if you do a race, some people come in and they watch it, and we stream it online on the Nürburgring channels, and people just watch that, and it's always nice because we reach more people from who are following real motorsports with our events. And of course, if you give us this opportunity, we're going to take it, and we try to make as many events as possible.
And in terms of, and relation to the interview I had earlier with Peter from Denmark, in relation to the Road to Green Hell 4-hour endurance event, which was for players of RaceRoom who had to qualify and then visit, what is the build of RaceRoom that you were using for the events, and why is it that for qualified contestants there was not? Now I can understand why in terms of organization of the event, but there was no access to the game menus or controls or car setups for people who already own the RaceRoom software and are familiar with setting things up. So why was that so?
Well, that was because we used the event software for the event, and this has to do with a lot of reasons. The main reason is that we use the same simulators for the WTCR event too, and we want to keep it open for people who do not have a RaceRoom account. So if I run the Steam version, first of all, I need a lot of internet for everything to work. And then everyone can come there and set their own settings. But if you don't have a Steam account, then it's going to be a big problem. And so we just use the event software, which is a version where we can predetermine the entry list for it, which we can assign a car to a certain simulator and stuff like that. So it's a lot more convenient to use this sort of setup in an event. And for an event with WTCR, where there are groups switching on the simulators, where Division 1 is racing, and then 10 minutes later, the drivers of Division 2 go on the same simulator, this is the only way that such an event can be run. So this would be impossible if people have 10 minutes to switch to their Steam account and change all their settings on a wheel that they're not familiar with. So we decided that overall we will use the event version for this event, and the event version does not offer a setup. menu or something like this. And you do not have a keyboard at the simulator. So, but in a way, I can understand that if some people do not like that, because I do not drive on the standard setup, and I change my wheel a little bit when I drive at home. So I can understand that. But what we also wanted to create is a level playing field. And so we decided, okay, I make it clear from the beginning. I put in the rule book, this is the wheel we use. This is we use the standard setup. This is the race format. And I mean, it's like when you, in a real car, you also don't have a keyboard to change your view angle or so. So we just predefined the conditions, and then it was the same for everyone.
Yeah. But if I was, let's say a few months before, if I'm playing at home and I'm competing, if I'm adding my name to the leaderboard as a Steam user and a RaceRoom user, and I'm planning to qualify and visit the Road to Green Hell, did those guys know that, for example, there was no access to the rear view mirror, there was no access to, for example, adjust your seating position in all directions like you have at home?
Well, I mean, you could adjust it in a limited fashion, right?
Yes. Why
and
is that
of course
so?
You had the mirrors. Yeah, it's because we predefined the controls of the wheel.
Okay.
And to be honest, I sit in a real race car. I cannot change the seat.
No, but you can change. You can change the.
I cannot put up a rear view mirror that is virtual, so I don't understand the problem, to be honest.
But the virtual mirror is available in the game.
Yeah, it is, but for me, it's like a thing. We say, okay, we define, and this is something where I can understand the criticism. Maybe like that maybe it was not the right things that you could actually change on the wheel. But we tried this out, and for example, you have this the seating position. You can move your seat backward and forward,
yes.
And you also have a joystick on the wheel with which you can look left, right, and back. So you actually have access to all these. To all the possibilities, that you wherever you want to see, you can see that. So of course it's always going to be restricted because it has to be predefined what you can change on the wheel. Otherwise you cannot run such an event, because what you should not forget is that we provide all of the simulators, right?
Yeah, I understand.
48 simulators. And in some way you have to standardize to run these types of events.
Understand.
And I can understand the some things like with the virtual rearview mirror. I use it myself when I play, because it's just maybe for the safety reason. It's better to have that. So this is a criticism I can understand, and I think it's something that we can definitely fix. But in general, if you participate in such an event, it's just something you have to accept as the player. If you participate in a RaceRoom event,
yes,
we run it that everyone has the same standard, and we always run it that you have limited options.
Yes, that's just how it's been. And I mean, this is not a criticism. This is just feedback from me as a player. Like I said, I've been playing RaceRoom for a long time. I'm a big fan of your guys' content, and I follow what Georg does.
You can criticize, no problem.
No. Well, I don't. Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, you're giving me your time, and I don't. What I'm trying to do is, okay, I can understand if I'm visiting the Ring Arena at the Nürburgring. Now, obviously, I'm not going to sign in with my Steam account. Okay, that's not on. The field of view setting. There's a field of view setting in RaceRoom, which, let's say that's your base point. So let's say I set a field of view of 0.7 or 0.8, and then I have to go to the video options, and then I click race, and then I'm in the cockpit view, and then using the D-pad I can adjust my seat forward, back, or up and down. Okay, and then I can decide whether I'm going to use the representation of the actual rear view mirror in the car, or I can pull back far enough that I can see the simulated wing mirrors on the car. And if I want to, I can also turn on the virtual mirror. And that's, I mean, if I was qualifying at home for the event, that's how I would set it up. So it seems a little bit odd that you would go there and maybe, as you said, as I asked, maybe it's already in the conditions, maybe somebody should have known. Of course, you can limit what the person can do, but at least you can set the field of view, the forward position of your seat, the vertical position of your seat, and then use the virtual mirror if you wish to, because you have qualified for the event and you've gone there to compete, and you're just at least you should be able to use a variant of what you're using at home, at least in terms of what you can see on the screen. Am I making sense?
I can understand where you are coming from, but I have to tell you quite honestly that there will be this kind of restrictions, there will be these kinds of restrictions that are just necessary when you use the same simulators for multiple people.
Yes.
And that are also necessary if you have the simulators. The thing is, right, if I open up everything, if I run with for example, we could say, okay, we run the team event with our online version.
Yes.
And that's something we thought about as well. That we just put the online version on, but that just raises a whole different set of other problems.
Yes.
And that raises the problems that people, first of all, have full access to our PCs and they change everything, or that we have to go through every single driver with 72 drivers
and check
when
what
we run
have.
at the same
I understand.
when we run at the same event, the time attack,
yes,
the practice sessions for everyone. That's not feasible.
No.
And then also one of the nice things of the event software is also that it really prevents cheating.
Yes,
because there's just there are no options for you to cheat, because you run on a different build that you have no access to.
Yeah.
And you also run on the same equipment. So for the future, I would say what's definitely going to happen is that we will consider opening it up a little bit in some aspects. Like I said, with the review mirror, this is something that I can that I can definitely understand. But when it comes to stuff like the settings of the field of view, that will always be fixed.
Yes.
So, and it's something where
to an average, which I could understand. Yes, that's okay.
Yeah, and this is something where I also say that for me, when you can bring the criticism and you can say, okay, it's annoying that I can change it at home and I can't change it there. And to that point, I agree with you, because it's annoying.
Yes.
But I mean, it's the way it is. Maybe we have to communicate it better that you can't change it.
Possibly so.
The argument that I do, that I don't count is the argument that because you cannot change that, it's not sim racing. And for me, this argument is nonsense, because if you drive in a real car, you do not change the field of view. It's something that is just like a gaming. It's like changing the field of view. It's kind of a driving aid. Yeah,
but that's not really
to
a
your
valid...
own. To your own. Yeah.
I take your point, but that's not a valid argument either. I mean, we are in a simulator at the end of the day. Now, is it fair to say that? Technically, I mean, conceptually, that there should be in a way. There could, in a way, be one event, one build or one setup option for the WTCR Oscaro event, and another build or setup option for the Road to Green Hell event. Now, I understand that you have a series of simulators and it's time and money to set these things up, but conceptually, could it be so that, I mean, realistically, that's how it should be? You have one level of access for one event for people who walk off the street, and another level of access or options for people who already own the consumer version of RaceRoom and are actually there to compete because they've already qualified. Is that a fair question?
Well, I mean, technically it would be possible if we run a event which is only for people who have qualified before, that we just run this on Steam.
Yeah.
But realistically, if we talk about this event, and if we talk about the events with large amounts of drivers, this is something that we will not change.
No.
Because I mean, I can understand the criticism, and before I joined RaceRoom, I was also a player, and it always annoyed me that I cannot change my setup at the event, because I can go a lot faster with the change setup.
Yes.
But when you work in these in these types of events, especially in such an event which is both, which is not just for the players, but which is also entertainment, where you run on a very limited schedule, and when you run just when you have to squeeze in a lot of different formats and different practice sessions and so on. And for example, we had the real WTCR drivers driving on the same simulators like 3 hours before.
Yes.
And for, when you have stuff like this, it will always be restricted.
Yes. Okay. But it's fair to say that you could technically set a reasonably wide field of view. So, and then, of course, everybody probably has their own field of view. Even they made.
Yeah, so we just put it to the standard, right?
What did you set it to? What was it exactly?
The default setting.
Which is 1x.
I don't know what the default setting is.
It's 1x, I believe. It's 1.
So it's
because it goes from 0. It goes from 0.5 to 1.3, and I think the default is 1. I have it like 7 or 8 or something like that. Yes.
So the thing is that it was very clearly possible to drive on the setup, and there were certain things like, okay, maybe the force feedback, maybe it's not ideal. There's some room for improvement.
Yes.
Maybe there's some room for improvement with the way the buttons are mapped.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But we had a very limited amount of criticism coming about our the way it was set up. So for the majority of the players, and Peter even said this, he cannot explain why the other teams didn't complain. Well, the fact is they did not complain. So for me, I just have a very I think it's a small issue that is right that we talk about, and it's right that certain steps will be taken to adjust it. But at the same time, it is for a player, if you want to participate in an event for free, which gives you all these other extra benefits, this is the price you have to pay.
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah, and I think from Peter's point of view, Peter is obviously a fan of the game. He runs the game. Now, Peter maybe is the exception. He's running his own event, and he's a motorsports fan. He went there for the weekend, and obviously he owns the 911 GTR GT3 at home, and he owns a Nürburgring, and he went there, and obviously
on the topic with Peter, I know of course that they're running the LAN event in Denmark, and I respect it because it's First of all, it's a great thing that they, for several years now, they're trying to push Simracing in a different area as well.
And they're very passionate about it, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But we just always have to remember that this is a different event. So this is something that you cannot compare one-to-one.
No, you can't.
If I go to Peter's event, first of all, I have to pay a lot more money. And then second of all, you're running an event which is, at least in the past years, pretty much entirely player oriented, where you bring your own simulator and where you do your own setup.
Fair enough.
On your own computer, where you can change everything, where you have access to everything, and where you really prepare with your team. And it's just a different format. And I said in the beginning of the interview, one of the main reasons why KW founded RaceRoom is to make the world of motorsports accessible for a lot of people. Yes, and this type of accessibility, especially at these events, for me, is something that has a higher value than offering every option that there is maybe that we could potentially offer with our game. And it's also something where I think, and also Peter said, okay, I don't think you understood my criticism. And I guess maybe I didn't, because I think it's a much higher value to keep the accessibility. And maybe that's a kind of an arcade aspect. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more important to have this event where you can do a nice race with other drivers, and you can come there and you can just participate. You can sit in the car, and then you practice a little bit. You need practice because it's a different wheel, and then you can drive the race. Yes. But you do not have to go into such great detail.
Yeah.
When it comes to the setup part of the event.
And invariably when you attend, you are going as a guest, and I can understand. But I guess if I think about RaceRoom has been constantly developed as a whole. You had the earlier complete physics refresh, and you had the addition of the improvement in the LCD screens, and you guys RaceRoom in itself, it's not like a traditional, it's not like, okay, well, I buy F1 2017 and I buy F1 2018. The latest topic now from EA and Activision Blizzard is like games as a service. You guys have been running a game as a service for years, in the same way that you're developing RaceRoom on a continuous basis, and this is one of your first major events, and the Road to Green Hell event was added to the WTCR event just to get the benefit of the setup that you had. So maybe there's room for improvement. There's a trade-off somewhere in between. And for somebody like Peter, I guess, who is the exception in a way, he's very passionate and he's running his own events, and maybe he had a certain level of expectations, although he said himself it was just 4 hours and he was going to the event anyway, and he was very glad to have the parking space and the camping space and so on.
So what I would just say is, of course, I mean, we have a limited time frame for this event in general.
Yes.
So
yes.
we knew in March that we would run the event.
Yeah.
So we had 2 months to prepare everything.
I understand.
So
yeah.
So that's, of course, it's limited. And of course, we're interested in constantly evolving the events to make it bigger, to make it so that more people view it. That is a better experience for the players. That is a better experience for the spectators.
Yes.
As well in the location. But at the same time, we are always going to have this accessibility in the RaceRoom events because it's part of the DNA of RaceRoom. And it's just something, I want to be open with it. You know, I accept the criticism, but I also want to be clear that there are certain things that we run in a certain way and that we are very convinced that our way is the right way to run these types of events.
Fair enough.
And if Peter is expecting an event like his event, then he has to go to his own event, you know, because it's going to be a different thing. Yeah.
Perhaps he wasn't expecting his own, but maybe as a RaceRoom player himself, maybe there's something in between. That's fair enough to say, I think. You know, something. So in terms of the options, now 2 more points, and then I shall let you go. One thing noted, Peter noted, a minor thing. He said that the pitting was AI controlled, that he couldn't. Peter noted one thing. He said that when they pitted in the endurance event, they weren't allowed to choose the amount of fuel. Why was that?
Yeah, this is the same argument as the first one.
Yeah.
You just have a system which is very accessible. You know.
Yes. Yeah.
A system where it's like you just know, okay, this is exactly what's gonna happen when you drive into the pits. And I told this in the briefing as well as in the rulebook. It refuels the car to 100% if there's more time left, and if there's a little amount of time left, it just refuels the car to an amount that you can safely finish the race. And of course, this limits strategy in a way, but it also opens up strategy. So it kind of doesn't change anything. I mean, you just have to deal with the different starting point. You just have to make your strategy according the knowledge that the car will be refueled. So maybe like a most-of strategy gets less attractive. Yes. And once again, this is something where you can argue, is it really sim racing? You know, is it really sim racing if you cannot change the amount of fuel? But if you're a real racing driver, you're not changing the amount of fuel either. You know, someone else is doing it. Someone from your engineer or so. And we kind of have this aspect as automated for the event. And there's some things that I wasn't happy about. For example, the AI control in the pit lane. I think it would be nicer if you drive into your pit box, because then you have to slow down and you have to find the right space. I think this is something that a driver should do. But in terms of the strategy, when you are a driver, that's not. I mean. For me, it's once again, it's such a thing where you just say, okay, this is the standard that you have to work with, and you have to adjust your strategy accordingly. Because otherwise, I also run out of buttons on the Fanatec wheel.
And in terms of damage, I'm assuming you guys had damage disabled for the Road to Green Hell event. Was it so? I guess you wanted everybody to finish.
Well, this is a point that I'm sure this will change for the future. Because this is also something that we run differently in the Mercedes competition now. And this is just something where we say, okay, this is our first event that we run on this stage. And we had a very limited amount of time. And that limited amount of time is not only to create the arena and the online competitions and invite all the players and so on, but also to create these builds that are being used in the event.
Understood. I understand.
And there's just sometimes you just have to make a decision, which is maybe not the proper way, but it's just a safe way, just to limit the amount of bullshit that's going to happen during an event. And so we went with the safe way.
Happen. Yeah, it will happen.
Yeah, but curiously, there was not really any weird accidents happening in the race. So I feel now more confident to to move a little bit more on the side of realism. There, of course, the damage model on RaceRoom itself is a bit limited, and everyone who played RaceRoom knows that. It's not.
That's true. That's true.
But it's something that for sure in the future will change, and then you have to be a bit more careful, because we saw some drivers, not in the team event, that was pretty fair, but in the WTCR we saw some drivers taking a little bit advantage from it, and of course this is something that that should not really happen. So I think their change can be expected.
Did you have any corner cutting penalties assigned in either events, by the way?
Yes. Yeah.
You did? Okay, you did.
That was active. That's once again, it's such a thing where people argue about it, like the slowdown penalties. It doesn't really make sense, but we tried for a long time online as well not to use them in the official competitions. And when you run on a grid with competitive drivers, then it gets abused from the first moment onwards. So we turned them on, and especially on the Hungaroring, some drivers were caught out by it, but everyone knew, of course, that it would be on. And I think on the Nordschleife, it's just not an issue.
And then one final point now, one thing that Peter mentioned, and I have to ask, he said that there was a suggestion of, he was attending there with 2 or 3 of his buddies, and he said that there was an option to have a table there and Wi-Fi and a place for their laptops and stuff where they could sit, they could sit while the other guy was driving, and then he said it just didn't happen. So can you talk about that, or is that a fair question?
I'm not sure where he read that, because that was not part of it's not part of the deal. I mean, in the end, I think we provide a competition where you can qualify for free, and you can drive a 4-hour race in a really cool location. Yeah. And of course you have to go to the Nürburgring. And if you live far away, or if you just don't want to go to the Nürburgring, then it's not attractive for you. But if you're a guy who loves the racing, and this can really add to your weekend, I'm convinced this is something that I say, okay, we offer it for free, but in my heart, I feel we should charge for it, because it's something cool. And it's something that where a lot of drivers, they come out of the event and they say, that was awesome. Okay, there's some stuff we need to improve. We will improve it. But in general, this is something, this is a way you can experience sim racing that you cannot really experience it anywhere else in the same fashion. In the same surrounding, on the same weekend, in the same style. And it was really big. If you stood in the arena and you looked there, it's like, it was impressive, I thought. And
no doubt,
of course, if you offer such a format, there's always some limitations. But I would like, if Peter wants to come next year, then if he qualifies, then of course he can come again, and he can have a nice sit in the RaceRoom cafe where we have a table for him.
I think it was, if I remember correctly, he said that during the briefing there was a reference to, like, for the teams who were attending the 4-hour endurance event, they would have a table where they could place their laptops, and they would have access to a power source and Wi-Fi, and then it somehow didn't happen.
Well, the only thing was that you could put a TeamSpeak connection to the drivers in the simulator. So the drivers in the simulator say had a TeamSpeak, and you could connect with them, so you can communicate during the race with your teammates. But we explicitly said that this was supposed to happen over phone, and that you should make sure to download the app before you go to the event, because you would not have Wi-Fi. So once again, this is also something that I think that does not make a lot of sense, especially if we run at the 24-hour weekend where network is very limited. And there's a lot of events going on. I mean, there's a drift show, and there's like 100 stands and so on. And we need a lot of bandwidth for streaming, and also to run our own operations. And as long as we have to do this from one network, I would not allow players in the same network. I think it's just an unreasonable risk.
So basically, you have to work with what you have and what you have available, and there has to be trade-offs at some point.
Yeah, that's kind of the overall story about it. So I'm like, if I was a player before, and the story when I joined RaceRoom was that I was at one of the first RaceRoom events ever, and I didn't like it, and I complained, and then they hired me. So I can kind of sympathize with a lot of these, with the way a lot of this criticism comes from. But for me, when I think I'll go as a player in this event,
fair enough.
I think if I would have seen this event, I would have been blown away as a player.
You would have been impressed. Fair enough.
And so the thing is, and that's the nice end of this. So we have people who don't like it. We have people who like it. We have me, of course, who kind of has a business interest to like it as well. But the nice thing is that I say 90% sure we will do it again.
Yes.
And everyone who watches your podcast and who's kind of curious now and says, okay, is this Robert guy, is he just talking shit? Or
I don't think so.
Does he have a fair point? Or is it really, I mean, I just would like to say, okay, guys, come on, just go to the next event. If maybe you're curious now, maybe you haven't experienced something like this. So why don't you come to the next event and check it out yourself? Because that's what we try to do. We want to try to make it open that anyone can come to the event and anyone can have a great time. And so anyone who's still curious now, or even more curious now, I would just like to invite them to come over.
I think they will be. And I wanted, my whole idea was, I received the email, like I told in the podcast, I received the email, I watched the videos, I saw his comments, I contacted him, I wanted to understand, because I know the title and I'm interested in esports and where it's going, and then I wanted to ask his point of view, and then I wanted to get your point of view, and it's trying to understand the overall picture. And I guess, like you said, you got hard because you joined and you complained, and like at the end of the day, RaceRoom itself on the consumer level, it's a game as a service. It's changing all the time, So
yeah,
so this is how it goes. To finalize, if I may, in terms of the web and up and coming events at the Nürburgring, the online events, and I mean, RaceRoom itself is available on Steam. So where should people go if they're interested in attending a race event where RaceRoom simulators will be there? Of course, now there's the RaceRoom Cafe at the Nürburgring. That's a constant installation. But in terms of attending events online, attending events in person and so on, where should they go to find out more information?
Yeah, so if you really want to experience RaceRoom on site, well, the top address is the Nürburgring Cafe, of course. But on RaceRoom.com, we have a list of permanent locations where you can drive RaceRoom, and it's in a few countries. So maybe your country is in there, and you can experience RaceRoom in a different form. When it comes to the big events, the Mercedes competition, of course, it's already running. If you're living in Germany, you can go to the museum and just try to qualify for that event. For the online competition, I can tell you it's gonna be really tough. This is really a competition where you can try out the cars for free, and it's nice and easy to try it out, but you really have to grind RaceRoom to get into the final. And then, of course, I would say it's the next big event is probably going to happen next year at the Nürburgring. Hopefully we can get something else sorted before, and if you have ideas for events, that's always appreciated. You can always send me a mail, because we want to push this topic. But in general, the Nürburgring, and that's because of the close relation with RaceRoom and the Nürburgring. Of course, there's a Simracing Expo as well, which we shouldn't forget maybe, which is also a good event that anyone should really check out who's into Simracing and into the whole Simracing lifestyle as well. So, I mean, you can play online, but it's kind of, for me, it's kind of a culture that is developing around Simracing, and that the Simracing Expo is another big event which you should probably not miss.
That's also at the Nürburgring, isn't it? So
yeah, so the Nürburgring is kind of the hub for.
When is that happening this year?
It's in September. I'm not sure what the date is. It must be like 18th or so.
September, yeah. In terms of the information, is it so that people should go to the RaceRoom game website or to the RaceRoom site where, for example, you sell the hardware and apparel and stuff? Where should people go?
I mean, you should just go to raceroom.com and then you can access everything. You can go from there. From there, you can go to the store. You can go to the game.
Yes.
And you can also find the location. So that's kind of a central place for all of the info.
So I'll include the relevant links below, and also your relevant social media. And is there anything coming up in the future that you'd like? Now, you mentioned already the ongoing Mercedes competition, but is there anything coming up in the future that you'd like to promote that's happening? Anything that's exciting related to esports, for example, or just RaceRoom in general?
Well, there will be some new announcement coming soon regarding esports. Regarding RaceRoom, of course, we talked about the TCR cars, which are not so far in the future. And of course, the historic Mercedes DTM cars, which will go into the store very soon. And what I would like to say for anyone who's curious about RaceRoom esports and who just listens to this podcast on a completely different note and has no idea what it is, maybe you can tune in on this Sunday on the Mercedes Facebook page, just the big one, the Mercedes-Benz Facebook page, or the Mercedes-Benz YouTube channel, Sunday at 16 Central European Summer Time, so 14 GMT. You can just tune in, you can just watch the race, and maybe you're just interested in the whole topic then. We always share the links on RaceRoom Facebook. So once again, if you just want to have all info, just follow RaceRoom on the social media, go to RaceRoom website, and then you'll always land in the right place at the right time.
And the Mercedes event, is this a regular thing? Is this occurring physical and online, or how does it go?
Yeah, that's just a championship that goes for 9 online races. So we have 9 leaderboard sessions where everyone can drive, and then the best players qualify for the live stream multiplayer race, and that also happens 9 times per year. So we have 9 live streams of online races, and then we have the big final in Hockenheim. And of course, we have the museum event this time as well. So we have two finals this year.
And are those streamed in both English and German? I don't recall.
They're just streamed in English.
In English, okay.
I think this whole sim racing events topic, that's something that will happen more in the future, because we are slowly getting more people in the sim racing, and that means there's enough demand also to do this kind of thing.
One last point: do you feel that the motoring industry, the motorsport industry, do they need sim racing now? Because the younger people, or that's my impression, the younger generation don't seem to be as interested in cars, at least a certain segment. So is it so that motorsport and the car manufacturers, in a way, esports is now something they need to which kind of feeds back into what they're doing? Am I right? Or do you see that yourself?
Sure. I see that the same way, because you can see the viewing figures in real motorsports is going back. The live attendance is going back. They're serious, struggling to find entries and struggling to find sponsors. And the only thing that is really growing in the world of motorsports, I guess Formula E is kind of growing as well, but then the sim racing is growing. It's not growing at a crazy pace, but there's more people getting interested in it, and that's interesting because it's the opposite direction that the rest of motorsports is taking, and you can see it already now with these types of championships, with these. With Nicky Team, Jan Seifert, and so on, playing, streaming sim racing.
That is true.
With these events and so on, that this is changing, that this would not have been possible a couple of years ago in the same capacity. And I think there will be more, a closer collaboration happening. And I think also for, in the long term, there will be probably some better terms and conditions for the people who make sim racing games. I hope so, at least, because right now it's still very expensive to get the licenses, and
it is, that's
so
true.
I think they finally they start to change their mind about it. They see, okay, this is something we can use to our benefit, that will help us in the long term, and so I think in the future that's a good development.
And it comes back to the point of maybe them making their brands more accessible, because it benefits them to have a representation of their brands and motorsport series in the virtual environment. And I guess it's fair to say it's realistically the advent of the internet and better graphics and so on. That's kind of really what's pushing it, isn't it so?
Yeah, that's especially with the hardware side. This is something I'm not so involved in. You can see a lot of development always, and also a lot of bigger companies are going into the more hardcore stuff, like Fanatec announcing a new wheel. Let's see what that's gonna be, right?
Yeah.
And I have a strong suspicion what it could be. So like there's companies like Sparko getting into making game seats for sim racing. There's I'm pretty sure that Logitech, they will not sit on their G29s forever. I think they will go into a direction where they bring something more advanced, and not all of them. Then of course you have you have new games coming up, Assetto Corsa, Competizione, and so on. Not all of this stuff is really good for us as RaceRoom necessarily, but for the consumer, it is good, because you have more options, and you just have when there's a strong market, you just have everyone has an incentive to improve.
It benefits everybody. Yeah.
So I think that at the moment for players, it's the glory days,
Yeah.
It's maybe not the glory days that you don't have one sim that can do everything.
No,
but
that's
you
never
have so
going to be
many.
anyway.
Yeah, because everyone also has different priorities. But you have so many options to do whatever you want in terms of sim racing. You have so many cars, tracks, mods in some games. You can get all kinds of hardware, from budget stuff to like really hardcore motion simulators with direct drive wheels. And
like CXC are doing, yeah.
You can, I mean, if you have the money for it, then I guess you can you can do it. But it's great because it's something for everyone, and
that's true.
You just have this broad variety, and I still hope that sim racing gets a little bit cheaper, because then it's still expensive compared to other sorts of gaming.
It is.
But in general, at the moment, when you're already in sim racing and when you're already committed to spend a certain amount of money for your hobby, then I think at the moment it's a great time, because you can really experience a lot.
There's lots happening. Yeah. And actually, funny, the topic of Logitech had at one point announced they weren't going to make wheels anymore, wasn't it so?
Yeah, but then that changed, and that I think that shows there's quite a few sim racers by now. Yeah.
Do you still play any racing games currently? And if so, what do you play?
Well, I play mostly RaceRoom, of course. But I actually played RaceRoom before I joined. Before I started working at RaceRoom, and it is my favorite sim. But I have to say, I also really like Automobilista.
Okay.
And I kind of like Affected too. Also, it also annoys me, but I also like it.
Yeah. It's I agree. Yeah.
I don't drive as much as I used to.
No,
I still drive one league race every month in a German community called Virtual Racing with the GT3s and.
Yeah, and in terms of both the virtual and the real world, do you have a favorite series that you follow?
That I watch in real life.
That you follow, let's say maybe GT3 or Group C or Formula One.
I always liked the touring cars,
Touring cars, yeah, okay.
I always liked it, and I grew up in the 90s, and back then it was the super touring regulations, and before I got like the end of the DTM ITC years, and so I was always touring car fan. And then especially for me, that I can do events with the WTCR and with the Mercedes DTM team, of course, that's perfect.
Perfect for you, yeah. So you're basically, the content that you're involved in is what you're actually passionate about yourself, which not many people can say. Yeah,
living the dream. Yeah, it's nice. It's also sometimes a problem because you get emotionally invested in it, and that's not always good.
That's true.
But in general, overall, I would say it's good.
Yeah, but maybe this, I think you've been very honest and very frank, and I appreciate that, Robert, that you've been able to share your story, and I think that you've presented your case very well, and it's nice to hear that somebody who's passionate about something. You're very lucky, I would say. You're passionate about sim racing and certain sim racing genres or certain racing genres, I'll say, and you get to work directly with that. So that's kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice, and I mean about being passionate, it always has good things and bad things. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I think that's how the discussion. I mean, Peter wasn't really here this time, so it was kind of a discussion between us about the stuff that he said. But I think that's fine. That's just that's the way you have to move forward. Also just say your opinion and say your criticism, and then also live with the criticism that you get.
Yeah. Yes, and I think if anything, I wouldn't even say if somebody passes an observation, you say, okay, fair enough. Well, let's improve on that. And maybe if somebody does pass an observation, maybe okay, well, it's something that I never thought of myself, and I can improve on that.
So, you can never know. You can never know everything. There's always stuff that other people they have to experience. They have done it from a different point of view, and. Yeah.
There are as many opinions and sim racing setups as there are snowflakes. It's kind of Robert, thank you very much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to
And thank you. For me, first and foremost, it was most important to get both points across. And as a player of RaceRoom and somebody who follows RaceRoom on an active basis, it's good to know more. I get more about the overall picture.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully it will go on for a long time. And I see you and some of your listeners at the next event.